Hi, boys and girls. Oh, our story about Moses has been so exciting. The children of Israel survived escaping from Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea safely, and God protected them. And here they are. They've got a path across the sea, and now they're safely on the other side. And every day there is a cloud that leads them where they're supposed to go by the day, and then a fire at night. And they're ready to go into the land that God was going to promise, He had promised them. He had promised Abraham hundreds of years before that the children of Israel would have their own land. Remember that? Well, it was a long journey in the land that they're going to live, and they were following after God. But you know what? They had to walk. They didn't have cars. They didn't have planes. They didn't have trucks or buses. They had to walk. And they had all of their belongings. And remember, there were 1 million people. That was a lot of people. And they walked and they walked and they walked. And they started getting tired of walking. Can you imagine walking and walking day in and day out with your family? And you have to carry all of your food and all of your things. And you don't even know how long you're going to be on the road. It's hard enough when you're in a car. And you say, Mom, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, that's what was happening. They were walking and walking. And I'm sure the children all said, are we there yet? When are we going to get there? But you know what? Pretty soon they ran out of their food and their water that they were carrying with them. And they were so thirsty. And they started complaining, we're so thirsty. We ran out of water. What are we going to do? And so they were very complaining. They thought for sure they would die of thirst. And they started thinking maybe we should have been back in Egypt where we had water. Finally, they saw some water in the distance. So they rushed up to get a drink. And when they took a drink of water, it was bitter. It tasted terrible. It was rotten water. And they said, we can't drink this. And they started complaining to Moses. Moses, what are we going to do? We're going to die of thirst. We can't drink this. So what did Moses do? Did he complain? Did he argue? Did he say, stop complaining to me? No. He did what we all should do, and he prayed. He got down on his knees and he said, Lord, you brought us out of Egypt. Now please provide clean water for us. And he prayed to God, and guess what? God said, I want you to throw a part of that tree over there. There was a palm tree, and he said, throw a part of that tree into the water. So that's what he did. He threw this palm in the water, and wouldn't you know, here it is. And as soon as that palm branch hit the water and was floating in the water was pure. It cleaned the water. Now, do you think that was a magic stick that cleaned the water? No. It wasn't the stick that did it. It was Moses obeying God. He did what God told him to do, and then the water was clean. Oh, it was wonderful. And the people were able to drink as much as they wanted. So they ran to the water and scooped up as much as they could, and I'm sure they grabbed as many containers as they could to save some water. And then it was time to travel on. So they continued on their way, and you know, this was not actually, most of the land where they were traveling was a lot like a desert. They would come upon pools of water, and there would be some palm trees and things like that here and there. But a lot of the land where they were traveling was desert. And it was going to be such a long walk. And so as they continued on, day after day, they had their water, but little by little, their food started being all eaten, and they were starting to run out of food. And so they were very hungry, and they started complaining to Moses. We're so hungry. What are we going to do? We've run out of the food that we brought from Egypt. We wish we were back in Egypt. And, you know, as the people traveled, they would stay every night in tents. So there were no hotels for them to stay in. Every night they would pitch their tents wherever they would stop. And maybe they would stay in one place for a few days as they would get their tents all set up. But they would stay in tents, and little by little they started running out of food. And they were so hungry. And so they went to Moses again and said, what are we going to do? We're so hungry. And the people didn't ask God what they should do. They went to Moses and they asked him. And they said, you've brought us out of Egypt and now we're going to starve to death. And do you think Moses complained back and says, I know, maybe we should run back to Egypt? What do you think Moses did? Of course, he bent down again and he prayed. And he said, Lord, what are we going to do? The people are so hungry. Please provide food for us. And so God did something very, very special because Moses asked. And he said he would always provide for us. The next morning, when the people got up, there was stuff all over the ground. And it was this little white flaky stuff, kind of like cornflakes, I suppose. And the people bent down and they said, what is this? What is all over the ground? It looked maybe a little bit like snow, but it wasn't cold and it wasn't wet. And it was kind of flaky. And it was food, special food that God gave them. And they tasted it and it tasted sweet, like honey, like a biscuit, a little honey biscuit. I'm thinking maybe even like a frosted flake. And they didn't know what it was called. And so they called it manna, which manna means, what is it? So they called it, what is it? And there was this manna everywhere. And so they would get as much as they needed. And they would take it and they put it in bowls and they would bring it into their houses. And sometimes they would get more than they needed. They would kind of be greedy and they would just go, oh, we got to get all this food. We got to get all this manna. And they would collect a whole bunch, more than they could eat. It would fill them up and they had more. And they would bring it into their tent. And the next morning, it stunk. It smelled terrible. It was rotten. Well, God said, you just take what you need today. I will give you exactly what you need for today. You don't need any more. You don't need any extra. And if you take extra, it's going to rot. Except for on the sixth day. On the sixth day, remember, what is the sixth day? The Sabbath day. Well, the seventh day is the Sabbath day. And the sixth day, they were supposed to collect enough for that day and the Sabbath day. Because on the Sabbath day, they were going to rest and they would not go out and get any food. There would be no food out there on the Sabbath day. So on the sixth day, they collected twice as much. And then the next morning on Sabbath day, guess what? It wasn't rotten. It was fresh as could be, and they could eat it. So God blessed them on the Sabbath day because they collected extra on the day before. So just like our verse this week, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. They did that. They did not do their work on Sabbath day. They didn't go out and collect food because there was no food there. And so it was amazing. God provided for them on the Sabbath day. But, if the people did not obey, if they didn't follow God and obey him, then it would grieve God. It would make him sad and he would be not pleased with them. And then he wanted the people to keep the Sabbath. And so he said, do not work on the Sabbath. And so finally they did as they were told and they learned to obey. And do you know that God fed the Israelites this way, eating manna every day for 40 years? Can you believe that? For 40 long years, they wandered around in the desert looking for the place to live, and every day there would be that food that God provided for them. So, many years later when Jesus was on the earth, he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God. So God provided this manna. It's kind of like bread for the Israelites. And God provides for us. But he also wants us to have his word and listen to him and obey him. Will you do that today?